I still remember the day everything changed. It was the day my stepmom took something that wasn't hers, something that I had every right to, my inheritance. It didn't just feel like a betrayal, it was a full-on assault on everything I thought I knew about my family and the people I trusted most. But like any story of betrayal, there's always more than meets the eye. This isn't just about money, this is about the principle of fighting for what's rightfully yours, even when the odds are stacked against you. Let me take you back a few years to when everything seemed normal. I grew up in a small town, the type where everyone knew everyone's business and family was everything. My dad was my hero, strong, reliable, and always there when I needed him. He and my mom were divorced by the time I was 5, but they remained cordial for my sake. I stayed with my dad most of the time and I had no complaints. Then came Emily, my stepmom. She was kind and sweet at first, or so I thought. I never had any reason to question her intentions, until one day I found out I was wrong. When my dad passed away unexpectedly, it was a shock to everyone. He had been in decent health, nothing that screamed, "This is it." I had just graduated college, and while it wasn't the best timing, I wasn't prepared for what would come next. Emily, my stepmom, came across as calm, composed, and, at least to me, devastated by the loss of her husband. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The funeral had barely ended when Emily started talking about moving on. My dad's affairs were still up in the air and she was already making decisions, signing papers, and taking control of things without consulting me. Sure, she had been his wife for 15 years, but I never imagined how much of the estate I would lose without even being asked. It felt off, but I didn't want to be confrontational at a time like this, so I bit my tongue. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. I overheard a conversation that would change everything. There she was, sitting in the kitchen, talking to her lawyer about my dad's will. My dad had never mentioned much about it to me directly, but he always made it clear he wanted to leave me the house. It was a family home, full of memories I wasn't ready to let go of. I could hear Emily on the phone saying something about how it would be better if she handled things because I wouldn't understand. The phrase echoed in my head. I wouldn't understand? What did that mean? And that's when I knew. She had been planning this from the start. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily had never thought of me as part of the family. She was just biding her time, waiting for my dad to pass so she could swoop in and take everything. All those years of pretending to care, it was all a lie. I wasn't just a son to her, I was a threat to her plans. I couldn't just sit back and let her do this. This wasn't just about the house. This was about taking back what was rightfully mine. I was done playing the role of the obedient child. The day I found out about her betrayal was the day everything changed. I made up my mind that I would fight back, and I wasn't going to do it quietly. Growing up, I never really thought much about my dad's wealth. He wasn't a millionaire or anything, but he was comfortable. His work as a small business owner kept him busy, and he took pride in his family. We weren't rich, but we were well off in a way that mattered. I had everything I needed, and honestly, I never expected much more. My dad's love and support were the most important things to me. After the divorce, I was always at my dad's place. It was the one constant in my life, but that changed when Emily came into the picture. I was just a teenager at the time. She was warm, kind, and always smiling. At first I liked her. I thought she was good for my dad. But over time, I began to notice little things that bothered me. She was constantly trying to take control of my dad's life, making decisions without consulting him or me. I didn't mind too much at first. I figured it was just the way relationships worked, and I didn't want to cause any issues. When Emily moved in, things started shifting. I'd come home from school, and she'd be there, rearranging furniture or planning dinners with friends I didn't even know. My dad was always supportive, but I could tell he was slowly getting more distant. And as the years went by, Emily became more and more involved in every part of his life. She had a say in everything, his health decisions, his finances, even his friendships. It wasn't that my dad didn't care about me, but I began to feel invisible. He was preoccupied with Emily, and I started to fall to the background. I'll admit it, there were times I tried to talk to him about it. I would ask if he was happy, if Emily was good to him. He'd always tell me everything was fine, but I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't just that Emily was always around. She wasn't mean or cruel, but she always made sure I knew where I stood. She treated me like I was a guest in my own home, like I was a distant relative who could be pushed aside at any moment. Then, when my dad got sick, things escalated quickly. He started having health problems out of nowhere. It wasn't long before he was in and out of the hospital, and his condition worsened. Emily, being the good wife, took control of everything. She became his caretaker, handling all his medical appointments and financial matters. I didn't mind that she was helping, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slowly edging me out of the picture. It became clear to me when the first will reading happened. My dad had a will, which was no surprise. But when they started talking about his assets, his business, and everything he had worked for, I was shocked to hear how little was left to me. The house, the one thing that had always felt like a connection between me and my dad, was no longer mine. Instead, Emily had been listed as the primary beneficiary of everything. I wasn't even included in the list of secondary beneficiaries. That's when I first began to realize how much control she had gained over the years. She had become my father's closest confidant, and that had worked out exactly how she wanted. In those weeks after my dad passed, the changes came fast. Emily moved quickly, securing everything, even the family home. She made decisions on my behalf, assuming I wouldn't challenge her. At first, I was hesitant to fight back. My dad had trusted her, and it felt disrespectful to go against his wishes, even though I wasn't sure if those were his true wishes at all. But when I overheard her phone conversation, when I heard her words, that was when I knew I couldn't just stand there anymore. This wasn't about honoring my dad's memory. It was about someone taking advantage of a situation and making sure they kept control. That moment marked the turning point for me. Emily had pushed me far enough, and I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She had taken everything I had thought was mine, the house, the memories, the legacy. Everything was slipping through my fingers, and she didn't even care. She thought I wouldn't fight back, that I was just going to roll over and let her take it all. But she was wrong. I couldn't just let this go. Not after everything that had happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just waltz into the house, confront Emily, and demand the inheritance back. That would be too easy. And honestly, I wasn't sure how much control I had left. She was always one step ahead, always a little too calculated in everything she did. No, this had to be different. I had to be smarter, more strategic. So I started watching. I paid attention to every little thing. How she interacted with the lawyer, how she took control of the household accounts, the way she spoke about the will to anyone who would listen. The first step was gathering information. Emily wasn't stupid, but I had a feeling she was a bit too confident. She thought she had already won, and that was her mistake. I began to ask around cautiously about the details of my dad's will. Most of the people I spoke to didn't know much, but I did manage to track down a copy of the will, hidden away in a locked drawer in my dad's study. I couldn't believe it. The will wasn't what Emily had made it out to be. It wasn't a simple transfer of everything to her. There were provisions, certain conditions that Emily had conveniently overlooked. The house wasn't completely hers, and there were instructions for it to be passed to me once I hit a certain milestone, something I wasn't even aware of at the time. But the real game changer came when I stumbled across some financial records buried deep in my dad's old files. It was like finding a smoking gun. My dad had been making some questionable financial decisions in his final years, ones that seemed designed to ensure Emily wouldn't get everything outright. I found evidence of multiple transactions, bank statements, and accounts that she hadn't even mentioned. The more I looked into it, the more I realized Emily had been keeping secrets she thought I would never discover. There were even a few moments when I overheard her in the kitchen on the phone with the lawyer, acting all sweet and professional, but it was obvious she was trying to cover her tracks. The closer I got to the truth, the more arrogant she became. She believed she was in control of everything, that I had no power to change things. And why shouldn't she? She had everything in her grasp, didn't she? I started planning. It wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about exposing everything, showing everyone what Emily had been doing behind the scenes. I couldn't let her walk away with everything. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about justice. It was about righting the wrongs she had inflicted on me and my family. But I knew I had to move carefully. I couldn't let her know I was onto her, at least not yet. I needed to gather everything, every bit of evidence I could get my hands on. So, I started following her more closely, watching her interactions with the lawyer. I even managed to overhear her telling someone that the house was already hers and that she was planning to sell it soon. That was the moment I knew the time was near. Emily thought she was invincible, but she had underestimated me. With everything in place, I made my move. It was time to take back what was mine and show her just how wrong she had been. It all came together faster than I anticipated. With all my evidence in hand, I knew the time had come to confront Emily. But I wasn't going to do it quietly. I wasn't going to be the one to retreat into the shadows anymore. This time, I was going to stand tall and make sure everyone knew exactly what she had been doing behind closed doors. I invited her to meet me at the house, under the guise of wanting to talk about the estate. She agreed, of course. She probably thought it was just another chance to push me out of the picture, to throw some more legal jargon in my face. Little did she know, I had a few surprises up my sleeve. When she arrived, I made sure everything was set up. The documents, the financial records, and the recordings of her conversations with the lawyer, everything was ready to be presented. I could see the calm, confident way she walked into the living room, but I knew that wouldn't last long. She had no idea what was coming. We sat down and I started with small talk, pretending to be casual about everything. "So, Emily, how's everything going with the house?" I asked. She looked at me, that familiar smug grin on her face. "Oh, everything's fine," she said with a dismissive wave. "I've just been taking care of things around here, like your dad would have wanted." I almost gagged, but I kept it together. "Funny you mention that," I said, pulling out a copy of the will, "because I've had a chance to look through some things, and it seems there were a few provisions that you may have missed." Her eyes flickered for just a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. That was the first crack in her facade. I didn't waste time. I handed her the documents and pointed to the clause that had been carefully hidden, a provision my dad had written in his will. "This house isn't entirely yours, Emily. According to my dad's will, it was supposed to come to me after I reached a certain milestone, and I've got the proof right here." Her face turned pale. That's not possible," she stammered, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I moved on to the next piece of the puzzle, the financial records. "You didn't think I would find these, did you? You've been skimming money, making under-the-table deals with the lawyer, and hiding assets that were supposed to be split. Not to mention, there's a lot of money you've diverted into accounts that aren't even listed under your name. Your little arrangements with my dad, they're all right here." I could see her hands trembling now. She stood up, pacing the room. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, her voice cracking. But the cracks in her armor were becoming wider by the second. I wasn't done yet. "Oh, but I do," I said, pulling out the final piece of the evidence, the recordings. "And I have recordings of your conversations with your lawyer, where you openly talk about taking control of everything, about selling the house, and pretending like it was all yours." Her face contorted with rage as she lunged at the table, knocking over some papers. "This is all a lie," she screamed, her voice rising. "You can't do this. You don't know who I am." I stayed calm, leaning back in my chair. "I know exactly who you are, Emily. You're someone who thought they could get away with everything. You thought you could take it all, but you were wrong." The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She was done. The confidence, the arrogance, it all vanished. She was cornered, and she knew it. Her carefully constructed empire was crumbling right in front of her. As she sat there, eyes wide with panic, I finally stood up. "You've lost, Emily. You took everything from me, but now it's my turn." Her voice dropped to a whisper, a desperate plea for mercy. Please don't do this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But I had no sympathy left for her. "You made your choice when you decided I didn't matter. You thought I wouldn't fight back. Well, here's your answer. Everything you tried to take is coming back to me. The house is mine. The money, mine. And the people who you've manipulated, they know the truth now." She was no longer in control. I was. In the weeks that followed, everything I had fought for started falling into place. I took control of the house, moved back in, and began cleaning out the memories of my dad that Emily had so carelessly tried to erase. I was no longer an outsider in my own home. I wasn't just taking back a physical space. I was reclaiming my right to be part of my family's legacy. The legal battle was messy, of course. Emily fought tooth and nail, claiming the will was invalid and accusing me of fabricating the financial records. But nothing she did could change the fact that I had the truth on my side. The more I exposed, the more she tried to bury her own lies, but it was too late. People started coming forward, old family friends, business associates, even distant relatives who backed up the details I had uncovered. They all spoke of Emily's manipulative behavior and her attempts to take control of everything my dad had worked for. Her reputation was tarnished beyond repair. It wasn't long before she lost her lawyer, the one who had been helping her hide the money. He cut ties with her when he realized the case was a losing battle. As soon as she lost her legal team, she started panicking. She tried reaching out to me, begging me to settle, to make it all go away. Her calls were desperate, pleading for me to let her off the hook. She even offered me a settlement, money, property, anything I wanted, in exchange for silence. But by then, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. It was about standing my ground and showing her that I wouldn't be pushed aside any longer. As for the house, I stayed there, making it my own again. It was no longer just a place I lived. It was a reminder of what I had fought for. I repaired the broken furniture, repainted the walls, and restored it to the way it had been before Emily tried to take it all away. Slowly, I moved forward, living a life that I had earned through sheer will and determination. Emily, on the other hand, had nowhere to turn. She had burned bridges with everyone in her life. Her friends abandoned her, her family turned their backs, and she was left alone in the cold. The money she had tried to hide, gone. Her reputation, ruined. She had nothing left. The life she had worked so hard to manipulate, to control, had fallen apart in a matter of weeks. One last time, she tried to get in touch with me. I received a letter from her, long, apologetic, begging me to reconsider. She claimed she had learned her lesson and wanted to make things right. But by then, I had no interest in playing her game anymore. I tore up the letter without even reading it. There was nothing she could say that would undo the damage she had done. I had moved on, and I was stronger for it. Looking back, I realized how much I had changed through all of this. I wasn't the quiet, obedient son anymore. I had found my voice. I had taken control of my life and everything that had been taken from me. The victory wasn't just about getting back the house or the money. It was about regaining my dignity and proving that no one could take advantage of me again. The last time I saw Emily was when she showed up at the house standing on the front porch, looking broken and defeated. She tried to plead with me once more, but I just looked at her, shook my head, and closed the door. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need anyone who wasn't willing to respect me. I had won.